my sisters, my brothers, my people. Let me tell you something that will shake the very foundation of your spirit. Some of you are holding on to something that God has been telling you to let go of. Some of you are wrapped up so tight in a situation, in a relationship, in an attachment that has expired, but you're still there, crying, begging, pleading, when heaven itself is trying to open a new door for you. There comes a time in life when you must confront the chains that have been holding you back. Some chains are visible, but the most dangerous ones are the ones you can't see. The emotional shackles that keep you bound to something or someone long after their season in your life has expired. These chains are subtle. They wrap themselves around your mind, your heart, your self-worth, and your ability to move forward. And the enemy loves nothing more than to see you stuck in a place that no longer serves you. You see, emotional shackles don't just keep you connected to a man. You can be physically gone, but still mentally trapped. You can block his number, move to a different city, delete every picture, but if you haven't broken free emotionally, you're still his prisoner. That's why so many people leave relationships only to find themselves haunted by what was, held hostage by what could have been. That's why you still feel the sting of his words, the weight of his rejection, and the echo of his presence, even in his absence. But I came to tell you today that you were never created to be bound. You were never meant to live in the shadow of someone else's choices, constantly trying to prove your worth, fighting for a love that should have been freely given. The pain of attachment is real, but so is the power of detachment. And if you're going to step into your destiny, if you're going to walk in the fullness of your purpose, you have to recognize when it's time to break the chains and walk away. Some of you have been in bondage for too long, believing the lie that you're not enough, that you'll never find someone better, that you have to settle for less than what God promised you. The enemy has convinced you that if you leave, you'll be alone, you'll be lost, you'll be empty. But let me expose that lie right now. You will not lose yourself by letting go. You will find yourself. You will find the version of you that is whole, the version of you that is strong, the version of you that is healed and complete and no longer begging for what should have been freely given. And let me tell you something, there is power in separation. When you detach from what is draining you, you make room for what will sustain you. When you detach from manipulation, you step into freedom. When you detach from toxicity, you breathe again. When you detach from the past, you make room for your future. But it starts with a decision. It starts with the realization that you deserve better. It starts with understanding that your worth is not tied to another person's inability to see it. It starts with knowing that you don't need closure to move forward. Today is the day you break free. Today is the day you decide that your heart, your mind, your peace, and your future are too valuable to be held hostage by what was. Chains are breaking, strongholds are being destroyed, and freedom is calling your name. There is something powerful about separation that many people fail to understand. It is not just about walking away from someone, it is about stepping into a new realm of clarity, healing, and divine positioning. Separation is not simply about loss, it is about alignment. When you separate yourself from what is draining you, delaying you, and distracting you, you create space for what is meant to build you, bless you, and elevate you. Too many people stay in situations, relationships, and environments that no longer serve their purpose simply because they fear what will happen if they leave. They confuse attachment with love, comfort with destiny, familiarity with purpose. But let me tell you something. Not everyone who starts with you is meant to finish with you. Some people are seasonal. Some relationships are temporary. Some connections are only meant to teach you a lesson, not last a lifetime. And when you refuse to separate from what God is calling you to walk away from, you delay your own breakthrough. Think about the caterpillar. It crawls through life, limited by its form, bound to the earth. But when the time comes for transformation, it must enter a cocoon, a place of separation, where everything it used to be is broken down so it can become what it was always meant to be. There is no growth without separation. There is no transformation without isolation. And some of you are still crawling because you refuse to enter your cocoon. You are holding on to old relationships, toxic connections, unhealthy soul ties, and expired seasons because you are afraid of what will happen if you let go. But what if I told you that your wings are waiting on the other side of your willingness to separate? Separation is not rejection, it is redirection. When God removes someone from your life, it is never to harm you, it is to heal you, to position you, to protect you. Some of you have been praying for clarity and God has been trying to show you the answer, but you keep resisting because you don't want to be alone. But let me tell you, separation is not loneliness, it is preparation. God is setting you apart so he can bring you into something greater. When you separate from what is toxic, you make room for what is healthy. When you separate from confusion, you step into peace. When you separate from a dead-end relationship, you open yourself up for divine connection. You cannot receive the blessings that are meant for you while still holding on to what was never meant to last. And let me warn you, not everyone will understand your separation. Some people will criticize you. Some will call you selfish. Some will try to guilt you into staying bound. But when you know who you are and whose you are, you don't need permission to walk in your purpose. Your destiny is bigger than their opinion. So today I challenge you, separate yourself from what is holding you back and watch how God elevates you. Healing does not always happen in the presence of the person who hurt you. Sometimes the greatest healing takes place in their absence. When you finally detach, when you finally create distance, when you finally remove yourself from the constant cycle of pain, something powerful begins to happen. Your heart begins to mend, your mind begins to clear, and your spirit begins to breathe again. Too many people believe that closure comes from a conversation, an apology, or some grand moment of reconciliation. But let me tell you something. True closure comes from within. It is not found in another person's words. It is found in your decision to move forward, regardless of what was said or unsaid. Some of you have been waiting for someone to acknowledge your pain before you allow yourself to heal. You have been waiting for them to say, "I'm sorry," before you release the hurt. But what if they never say it? What if they never admit their wrongs? What if they never validate your suffering? Will you allow your healing to remain hostage to their inability to give you what you deserve? Healing begins the moment you realize that you do not need them to fix what they broke. You do not need their permission to be whole again. You do not need their presence to recover from the damage they left behind. In fact, some wounds can only begin to close when the person who caused them is no longer in your life. The constant reminders, the repeated disappointments, the cycle of hope and heartbreak, it all prevents you from truly moving on. But when they are gone, when the noise of their influence is silenced, when the distractions of their presence are removed, you are left with nothing but yourself and God. And that is where real healing begins. You see, healing in the absence is not just about forgetting, it is about rebuilding. It is about rediscovering who you are outside of the pain, outside of the relationship, outside of the brokenness. It is about learning how to love yourself again, how to trust yourself again, how to believe that you are worthy of joy, peace, and a future untainted by past wounds. There is something sacred about separation. When you finally detach, you give yourself the space to reflect, to process, to understand the lessons buried in the pain. You begin to see the relationship for what it really was, not through the lens of emotion, but through the clarity of distance. And when you gain clarity, you gain freedom. But let me warn you, healing is not immediate. There will be moments when you miss them, when the loneliness creeps in, when nostalgia tempts you to return, but do not mistake missing them for needing them. The void they left behind is not meant to be refilled with their presence. It is meant to be filled with your growth, your self-love, and your healing. So embrace the absence, lean into the discomfort, allow yourself to grieve, but refuse to stay in grief. Because on the other side of this pain is your freedom, your restoration, and your healing. There comes a moment after detachment when you look in the mirror and ask yourself, who am I now? For so long, your identity was wrapped up in that relationship, in being his woman, in making things work, in giving, sacrificing, and compromising. You poured so much of yourself into another person that when they left, or when you left, you felt empty, lost, unsure of who you are outside of that attachment. But let me tell you something, this is not the end of you. This is the beginning of you. Rediscovering your identity after detachment is not about going back to who you were before the relationship. It is about stepping into a new and stronger version of yourself. It is about reclaiming the parts of you that you neglected. It is about rebuilding your confidence, your peace, your dreams, your joy, not based on someone else, but based on who you were always meant to be. You see, relationships, especially unhealthy ones, have a way of making you shrink. You start adjusting yourself to fit their expectations, their desires, their needs. You silence parts of yourself to avoid conflict. You minimize your voice so you don't seem too much. You put your dreams on hold because you're trying to make the relationship work. And over time, without even realizing it, you lose yourself. But here's the truth. You were never meant to shrink to make someone else comfortable. You were never meant to lose your identity just to be loved. Real love does not require you to become less of yourself. Real love allows you to flourish. And now that the weight of that attachment is gone, it's time for you to take up space again. This is your season to rediscover what makes you come alive, to ask yourself, what do I love? What brings me joy? What are my dreams, my goals, my passions? Who am I outside of someone else's opinion of me? For too long, you've been defined by a title, girlfriend, wife, partner. But now it's time to be defined by your own essence, your strength, your wisdom, your purpose. You are more than someone's companion. You are more than someone's emotional support. You are a whole person worthy of love, happiness, and fulfillment with or without a relationship. And let me tell you something, this process will feel uncomfortable at first. When you've spent years identifying yourself in relation to someone else, it feels strange to stand alone. But this is your time to bloom, to do the things you put on hold, to chase the dreams you abandoned, to love yourself in ways you once expected from someone else. Because the truth is, when you rediscover your identity, you don't just find yourself. You find peace, power, and purpose. And when you walk in your true identity, you will never settle for less again. There is something about letting go that creates space for God to step in. When you finally detach from what was never meant to hold you, when you finally walk away from what was breaking you, when you finally surrender the pain, the confusion, and the heartbreak, that is when God moves. Some of you have been fighting battles in your own strength, trying to fix what was never yours to fix, trying to hold together something that was already falling apart. You have prayed, cried, begged, and pleaded for things to change. But what if I told you that the breakthrough you've been waiting for is on the other side of your willingness to let go? What if I told you that God has been waiting on you to move so He can move? You see, as long as you keep your hands on it, as long as you try to control the outcome, you are standing in the way of what God is trying to do. Sometimes God cannot bless you until you release what is blocking the blessing. Sometimes God cannot bring you into your next season while you are still clinging to something or someone. He told you to leave behind. Think about the Israelites. When they were enslaved in Egypt, they cried out to God for deliverance. They wanted freedom, but when the time came to leave, many of them struggled to detach. Even after God parted the Red Sea, some still longed for Egypt. How many of us are asking God for a new season while still holding on to the comfort of the old one? How many of us are begging for change, but resisting the very separation that would bring that change? But when God steps in, everything shifts. When God steps in, doors that were once closed suddenly swing open. When God steps in, the pain that once consumed you becomes the very thing that propels you into your purpose. When God steps in, you realize why certain relationships had to end, why certain people had to leave, why certain seasons had to close. Because He was making room for something greater. And let me tell you something, God does not just replace, He upgrades. When you surrender to Him, He does not just restore what you lost, He gives you something better. He heals in ways no human can. He fills the empty places in ways no relationship ever could. He brings divine connections, supernatural peace, and purpose-driven alignment. But here's the key, you have to trust Him. You have to trust that what you lost was never meant to sustain you. You have to trust that your detachment was not a mistake, but a setup for something greater. You have to trust that he knows what he's doing, even when you don't. Because when God steps in, you will see why that relationship had to end. You will see why he removed certain people from your life. You will see why he asked you to let go. And when you finally see it, you will thank him for every single thing he took away. There is something powerful that happens when you finally walk away from what was holding you back. You may not see it immediately, and at first it may even feel like loss, but in reality, your exit was not just about leaving something behind, it was about stepping into something greater. What you thought was the end was really just the beginning, because when you obey the call to detach, to let go, to separate yourself from what no longer aligns with your destiny, elevation is inevitable. Many people stay stuck because they confuse attachment with purpose. They believe that their life, their joy, their identity is tied to a person, a relationship, or a situation that God never intended to be permanent. They think that walking away means failure, when in reality, walking away is the first step to victory. The reason some people never reach their next level is because they refuse to exit the level they've outgrown. But let me tell you something, you cannot elevate while clinging to dead weight. Think about Abraham. God told him, leave your country, your people, and your father's household and go to the land I will show you, Genesis 12:01. Notice that God did not show Abraham the full picture before he left. He did not give him all the details. He simply said, go. And it was only after Abraham exited his familiar place that God elevated him into the promise. What does that mean for you? It means that your elevation will not happen in comfort. It means that sometimes God will call you to leave without a clear roadmap, without knowing what's next, without seeing the full plan. But if you trust him enough to walk away, he will take you higher than you ever imagined. Elevation happens after the exit because detachment creates room for growth, clarity, and alignment. When you stay in the wrong place for too long, you start to shrink. Your vision becomes blurred. Your purpose becomes stagnant. But the moment you step away, the moment you finally break free, you position yourself to receive what has been waiting for you all along. Watch what happens when you exit. Peace replaces confusion. Opportunities start chasing you. You attract the right people into your life. Your confidence is restored. You rediscover your strength. Doors that were once closed start to open. And let me tell you something. People will notice your elevation. The same ones who doubted you, the same ones who thought you would fall apart without them, the same ones who mistreated you, will look up and wonder how you became so powerful, so successful, so at peace. And the only answer will be, because I finally let go. So do not fear the exit. Do not fear the transition. Do not fear the unknown. Because what's ahead of you is greater than what you left behind. Elevation is coming, and when it does, you'll realize that the exit was the best decision you ever made.